What's up guys, it's WidgetTV here. In today's video, we're going to be going over some of the similarities and differences between Monster Hunter World and Dauntless. But first, real quickly, let me give you some background information on Dauntless. So Dauntless is coming out sometime later in the year only on PC. Dauntless was actually announced before Monster Hunter World ever was. It was looking to bring the beast slaying genre to the West, and it was going to do it by offering a game that was free to play. But the unchallenged king of the beast slaying genre, Monster Hunter, announced World and released it before Phoenix Labs, the developer of Dauntless, could release their full game. The eventual full release for Dauntless is scheduled for sometime in 2018, and with an open beta scheduled for May 24th, it's now time to take a serious look at this game. So here are some of the similarities and differences between these two games. First, let's start from the very beginning, at the character creation menu. Both of these games have fairly robust character creation systems that do a very adequate job, and it's especially nice to see this from Dauntless because its developer is not a AAA studio. And let's keep in mind that this game is firmly in early access, so full marks to Dauntless. Next, let's take a look at these games' gameplay loop. This is where the similarities between these two games is really evident. So both of these games have sprawling hub worlds where you can go craft weapons and armor and get quests. From these hub worlds, both of these games encourage you to prepare for your upcoming quest by picking what weapon you're going to use and managing your loadout. Then in both games, you run to the quest board and select your quest. Then in both games, you can load in and mess with the local wildlife. And you can run around in both games and gather crafting supplies before the big fight. Next, in both games, you spend some time wandering around looking for the monster that you're hunting, followed by finding the monster and initiating the fight. Then in both games, you can pick up crafting supplies that fall off the monster, followed by cutting the monster's tail and slaying the monster. And then in both games, you go back to the hub world and craft new weapons and armor with the new materials that you've gained. And obviously that restarts the cycle. So as you can see, these games' gameplay loops are very similar, which, don't get me wrong, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it does a great job of faithfully recreating Monster Hunter's gameplay loop. Now, some people are undoubtedly going to say that this is just a shameless ripoff of Monster Hunter, but I have to concur when it comes to these gameplay elements. But I will be talking about some true shameless ripping off here later in the video. But in my mind, it successfully avoids that argument that it's just a cheap ripoff. But this raises a question. If Dauntless and Monster Hunter's gameplay loops are so similar, how does Dauntless differentiate itself from the competition? Well, it does this in a few different ways, starting out with the most obvious, and that's its art style. So as you can see, Dauntless has a much flatter, less realistic art style, and I feel like this is much more important than you might think. I feel like it allows the developers to go crazy with their ideas, and I feel like it allowed them to add mechanics that would feel kind of out of place in a Monster Hunter game. And this leads me right into the second part that separates these two games, and that is the mechanics. So in Monster Hunter, you basically go out into the wild and you attack the monster until it dies. Obviously, there's some nuance in there with each individual monster, but for the most part, other than the Elder Dragons, the monsters basically don't throw any curveballs at you. In Dauntless, this is still true for the beginner monsters, but when you get later in the game, monsters start feeling like a small Destiny raid. So if you're familiar with Destiny raids, this will make sense to you, but if you don't, it's basically just a bunch of small mechanics that you have to deal with while dealing damage to the boss. I really like this aspect about Dauntless, and that's why I'm really excited for this game. But now let's change gears a little bit. So for this entire video, I've pretty much talked positively about this game, but not everything with Dauntless is perfect. Let's start with my biggest complaint about this game, and that is the performance issues and bugs. So this is very important to say before I say some of this stuff. This game is still in early access and hasn't even hit beta yet. And in fact, while recording this video, a patch dropped that fixed a bunch of different things that I was going to talk about, like poor performance in the hub world, and it fixed some of the resolution problems that I was having. But I still think some of this is worth saying. First and foremost, the performance of this game is not very good. Now don't get me wrong, I have a pretty high-end CPU, but I only have a 1060 graphics card. Even at 1080p, I could only turn the graphics up to about medium and maintain about 40 or 50 frames per second. And just in my opinion, I feel like that is not okay. So optimization is something I think Phoenix Labs needs to focus on, especially because Monster Hunter can look like this and pull off nearly 60 frames per second on my PS4 Pro. Second is bugs. So when I first started up Dauntless, it was a bugs nightmare. I had resolution issues where it would get stuck on a low resolution, cursor tracking issues in the menu, and a lot of crashes. This I think can be best described as early access issues, but the developers definitely need to squash all the bugs that they can. And finally, we have the shameless ripoff of the dual blades in Monster Hunter. Now in Dauntless, they're being called the chain blades. The chain blades do have an interesting mechanic where you can throw the blade out and do some damage from range, but this costs a lot of stamina. But it also allows you to dash around faster than any other weapon. So does that remind you of anything? A weapon that is held in both hands, that attacks fast, that you can do faster dodges in, and it consumes stamina to attack? Yeah, that sounds an awful lot like the dual blades. This is kind of a small gripe, but because Monster Hunter and Dauntless are so similar, I feel like they would try to distance themselves from anything that felt like Monster Hunter. But this must just be one that they couldn't go without. So Dauntless and Monster Hunter are both going to be competing in the Beast Slayer genre later in the year on PC. But because Dauntless is free to play, I would suggest everybody check it out, especially when the open beta lands here on May 24th. Alright, that's all I have for now on these two games. Expect more Dauntless content in the future, so if you're at all interested in Dauntless or Monster Hunter, make sure to subscribe. Also, consider following me on Twitter. It's the best place for me to keep in contact with you guys. But anyway, this has been Widgeon TV. Thanks for watching, guys.